Serious. What's your true, supernatural, unexplainable, downright creepy story? Please do like, share, and subscribe. When I was in 5th grade, I was walking to the bus, and it was just breaking dawn. I had to walk about half a mile down a back road with woods lining either side. About halfway down, I was surrounded by about 8 or 9 dogs, not wolves, but like actual different breeds of domestic dogs. They didn't make a noise, but they blocked my path in a half circle. I was terrified and ran back home, and when I looked back, they were gone. When I think back on it, I hope maybe they were protecting me from an unknown danger down the road that morning. Who knows? We had a computer room in our house that was at the end of a hallway, so I went down the hall to use the bathroom, and I could see the glow from the computer screen dimly lighting up the room. Then it looked like someone walked in front of it and cast a shadow on the wall. I jumped and then started laughing. Jeez, you scared me. I look in and there's no one in the room. I booked it out of there and avoided that bathroom for weeks. My colleague used to work in a hospital and would often receive phone calls around 3 a.m., but no one would speak at the other end of the receiver. The number was from an extension somewhere in the hospital, and when they looked it up, it was from an old morgue nobody had used in a while. My roommate and I lived in a 100-plus-year-old farmhouse. Many strange things happened there, but there is one story I tell the most. One day, we were watching TV in the living room on the main floor, and suddenly we heard a loud crash, glass breaking, and felt the floor shake in the ceiling above us. We both ran upstairs and could not find one thing out of place. My family moved to this standard upscale suburban home after roughing it for a couple of years to save up. We also got a deal on the home because it was a model home before it was ours, like had all the fake furniture to show off the neighborhood homes. Anyways, it had this loft area with 2 stairwells that go up to it, one in the front and one in the back. You could pretty much hear everything from this loft since it was so open. One day, my 2 best friends, guy and a girl, are hanging out in the loft. We were in high school, and they were horny and always all over each other, whether I was in the room or not. We were watching TV, and I get up to take a piss. When I left, they were all up on each other. When I came back, they were on different ends of the couch. They gotten into a fight, so I asked what was up. "Your little sister's home," the dude says. My face turned sheet white. "What's wrong?" the girl asked. I asked them what made them think that. They said they heard her. I'm sort of freaking out at this point. "No one's here," I say. We check the house, and I'm right. Well, it turns out that before it was a model home, a family lived there, and a little girl had been playing in the loft, but had climbed on the railing and fell to her death below. My 2 best friends swear to this day that they heard what they thought was my sister laugh and run up the stairs, hitting her hands on each step like she was running up on all 4s. I never had any encounters other than the fact right next to where she landed was the house's central intercom. We had an intercom system in every room that you could play music through or talk to each other. Every so often at night, at the same time, you'd wake up to the intercom button being pressed and just a blank sound of static, airways like someone was holding down the button, but no one was speaking. My room was on the 3rd floor, and I'd have to walk down to the bottom to the main unit and turn it off there. I always thought I'd see her. When I was a baby, we lived in a big old manor house with my grandparents. One day, my dad woke up in the middle of the night to see what looked like a ghost of my mom on top of the bed, screaming and trying to get into my mom's sleeping body. It freaked him out so much that he refused to ever go back to the house, and we moved out. When I was about 6, we had moved out and had our own apartment. One morning, just after we woke up, my mom went to make a warm cup of milk for both of us. It was winter, and the lights were off in the room, but were on in the corridor. I can remember vividly seeing the dust come together and a ghost in the form of my mom, but dressed like she was from the 1800s, came together and walked out of the room following after my mom and not acknowledging me in any way. It was the most surreal thing that I've ever seen, and I still vividly remember it. I was invited to a sleepover at my friend's house when I was 9 or 10. It was in a crummy, crime-ridden part of town, and I was already apprehensive about the whole thing. Turns out my friend planned for us to sleep in tents outside in the backyard. We go to sleep, and I unexpectedly wake up in the middle of the night. All my friends are gone from the tent. Freezing cold and absolutely terrified, I look around the yard and eventually enter the house. None of the doors are locked, and for the life of me, I can't find a living soul. I'm practically all alone, scared shitless in my pajamas. I find a phone and call my mom. About 15 minutes later, she picks me up and takes me home. Later, I found out that my friends had moved to a different tent in the yard without telling me. In my panic during the night, I thought they had all disappeared. Not really supernatural, but in the moment, it was the most horrifying, inexplicable thing I'd ever had the displeasure to experience in my childhood. My grandmother, who died before either my sister or I was born, was a huge Scrabble player and actually won a regional Scrabble championship from the Midwest United States. When my sister was very young, my parents got out of my grandma's old Scrabble set to show her how to play, even though she was too young to spell anything over 3 or 4 letters. The game Scrabble starts by each player pulling 7 tiles from the bag. My sister, who I will remind you was very young at the time, pulls out 7 tiles and says, "What does EILOARS spell?" My parents look at the letters and realize that my sister Rosalie, who was named after my grandma Rosalie, pulled her exact 7-letter name from my grandma's Scrabble set. I'm home alone one day. It wasn't dark or spooky or raining or anything. It was the middle of the day, and I had just gotten home from work. Now, I shit with the door open when I'm home alone, since why the fuck not? I'm doing my business and browsing Reddit as per tradition when I hear my laundry room door open and slam closed. Odd. It's only 2 p.m. and my parents don't get home from work until at least 4. My sister was at school, but maybe she left early. I yell, "Hello?" and reach over and close the door so that whoever is home doesn't have to see me shitting. I hear some footsteps walk into the living room, then just stop. I yell again, but no response. My dad listens to audiobooks a lot on his phone, so I figured he walked in with earbuds in and didn't hear me. I finished my business up and walk out to see who was home, and no one was there. I kept yelling around the house, but there was no answer. I walked outside and it was just my car in the driveway. I started to panic a little bit, since my laundry room door is quite heavy and is very loud when it closes, so there was no way I misheard something. I searched the whole house, looked outside on the patio, side yards, etc. Nothing. No one was there. I then got this huge feeling of fear and bolted back inside and just sat on the living room couch waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. No noises, no sounds, no doors opening, nothing. I eventually got up and went back to my room and never heard anything again. It would have scared the shit out of me had I not taken care of that problem beforehand. I guess it's not incredibly scary or anything, but it is weird. When I was about 12, our family moved into a new house, new to us, actually quite old. It was in our same village, but down a different lane. Part of it used to be a bungalow, so my room and my sister's room were on the ground floor, down a long hallway. All of the ground floor had walnut flooring, and there was a Persian rug outside the door to my room to avoid cold toesies in the morning. Every night, around 11 or so, I would hear footsteps walking at a fairly slow pace right down the hall, from the end guest suite up past our rooms and away down the hall to the living room. I was always in bed when I heard them, and so was everyone else. You know how you can tell who a family member is by the way they walk up the stairs or open a specific door? I knew it wasn't anyone in my family. Plus, it was the sound of outdoor shoes clacking on the wood, and everyone in my family wore slippers inside the house. I would hear the footsteps start, fairly loud on the wooden floor, way down the hall, come up past my sister's room, and then there would be a pause, while whatever it was walked over the rug. You could hear the gap in the footsteps, about 3 seconds. Then they would start again on the other side of the rug and fade out as they walked down the hall away to the living room. Then they would come back, same footsteps, break across the rug, resumed on the other side. I don't remember ever feeling scared, but I never went out to see what it was. I would fall asleep to the sound. It would go on for a really long time. It stopped about 3 or 4 weeks after we moved in, and I never heard it again. I didn't really think about it much after it stopped, but I've never forgotten it, and as an adult, it makes me shiver to remember it. Creepy depends on your perspective about it, but lost time. My brother was helping me across the country. We borrowed a van and loaded everything up for the last trip. Just before we left, I checked my watch and called my girlfriend that we would be hitting the road soon. My brother checked the kitchen clock, but only told me later he did. We set out, but couldn't do more than 80 kilometers an hour because of the load. When we took the off-ramp of my new city, my brother told me he couldn't remember the trip. When I thought about it, neither could I. We both thought we were tired and thought nothing of it. However, When we arrived at my new house, my girlfriend asked if I broke the speed limit because we were almost an hour early. When retracing the route, my brother and I both agreed that we can remember passing a certain gas station and nothing thereafter until the off-ramp. To this day, we have no clue what happened during that hour we're missing or how we could have traveled that fast, not with any car or van at least. Now, at the beginning I wrote we both independently checked for time. This is important for us because one time source could have been wrong, but not both. Also, I called before we left, which limits the time we could use to travel. Since then, we have never experienced any weirdness like it or otherwise. I don't have any weird memories or dreams, no pieces of metal lodged under my skin, etc. Just an hour I lost. When I was around 10 years old, I had this super fucked up dream. It started out with me in my house, alone, during the day. It's a small house, several minutes walk to the closest neighbor, and more or less surrounded by woods. I heard something coming down the driveway, like tires crunching in the gravel, but much slower. Went out on the porch to investigate and saw an old-fashioned covered wagon being pulled down the driveway. For some reason, this filled me with dread, and I ran back inside to lock all the doors. Once that was done, I walked down the staircase into the basement, where I knew I could see him from the window built into the door. The wagon stopped moving once I was watching, and the man climbed down from the seat and stood in front of it. He was dressed in a black suit with a black top hat, and he was looking right at me through the window glass. Once he was sure that I saw him, he walked to the back of the wagon and pulled off the cover. There were people hanging from the supports at the top of the wagon, feet dangling, rope around their necks. They looked dead, but the man in the top hat did something and their heads started inflating. It got to the point where it looked almost cartoonish. Eyes bulging out, red faces, the works. He kept looking at me while he did it, and I just knew he was going to do the same thing to me. Woke up absolutely terrified, and to make things 1,000 times worse, the power was out, meaning it took me a ridiculous amount of time to make my way into my parents' room and camp out on their floor. Here's the creepy bit. I never told anyone about this particular dream because it was so fucking weird. Maybe 2 years ago, my family and I got into a conversation about the freakiest dreams we've had. I figure, what the hell, it's been 10 years, I can probably bring it up without hyperventilating. So I start telling the story, leaving out a lot of details for brevity's sake, and when I get to the part about the wagon coming down the driveway, my younger sister gets the weirdest look on her face and says, "Was the man wearing a top hat?" We quizzed each other, and we remembered most of the details in the same way. I can't quite figure out how we both had the same dream though. I think a likely explanation might be that one of us told the other about the dream and then forgot, and the other party just constructed their own memory of it. But I distinctly remember not telling anyone about it because I thought it was too weird to share. I still get freaked out when I think about it, and to date, that's probably the strangest dream I've had. I don't think it's supernatural, but it was creepy. My mother died suddenly 3 years ago, 8 days before the birth of my son. There's a picture on the wall of my house of her, and he knows it's grandma. My dad is still in that house, but we have never visited, partly because I have a mental hang-up about going back there, and partly because of the logistics. It's an overnight ferry. Dad visits us often, and I will go back there soon. Anyway, my son has never seen the house, and I've never shown him photos of it. He hasn't been to the village, the area, or even the country, France. I was showing him Google Maps last week, and the thing you do with your phone or tablet where if you move the device, the field of view moves with you. So I'm showing him our house, his other grandmother's house, his school, etc., and he gets it and has a play. My dad lives in rural France, so the Google car hasn't done a pass of his street to my knowledge. I decide to check, and it's just been done, so I drop the pin and open it up. The view opens with the house over the street, so I start to move it, and my boy shouts, "Grandma's house." A bit taken aback, I ask, "How did you know that?" Because it was. Bit eerie, so I ask him to point at the window and say which one is the kitchen, and he puts his finger on it straight away. Which room does Daddy sleep in? Again, the finger on it straight away. Which one is Grandma's? He points to it and says, "It was that one." Loads of rational explanations, etc., but it creeped me out. My aunt's house is haunted. She moved there when my cousin was about 2. She knew it was haunted instantly, but stayed because the ghosts were not malicious. My cousin, now about 30, grew up there knowing it was haunted, as well as my 2 younger cousins. They talked about it so nonchalant, like it was just part of their daily routine. I'm way into spooky stuff, so hearing this time and again at family functions, I asked to spend the night specifically to listen for the ghost. I was about 17 at the time. Here's exactly what happened that night that was strange. My cousin, my aunt, and my aunt's friend are watching Carrie. It's winter time, and all week their fireplace was not working. My cousin says out loud, "When is the movie going to get scary?" Just then, the glass patio door in the kitchen opens. After the movie, we go to the hot tub because we were cold. After a while in there, we come back inside and the fireplace is blasting full heat out of it. My aunt laughs it off as the ghost's messing with us. They play pranks like this is a lot, apparently. After everyone is asleep, I'm on the couch and my cousin is on the floor next to me. I hear from the basement footsteps coming up the stairs. The basement door is visible from where I am laying. I hear the steps come all the way up, and the stairs stop on the top. I'm terrified and expect someone to come out the door, but nothing. A moment passes and the steps go back downstairs. This starts to repeat, up and down the stairs. I wake up my cousin terrified. I say, listen. It's crystal clear. A person walking up and down the stairs right there. He looks at me and is like, dude, that happens every night. Go back to sleep. It went on for about 30 minutes, up and down the stairs. I was mortified. I have more stories from my aunt, but that was one of the experiences I had. I've also, other occasions there, have seen lights turn on and off and heard more footsteps. She thinks it's children. They live across the street from a school that also had people report strange activity. When I was in high school, my uncle would throw me a couple bucks to help babysit his kids with my aunt. They lived in a 2-story house by the water, nice area. The kids were about 3 and 6 respectively. One day, I was sitting in their den on my phone when I started to hear a baby crying. Thinking it was the 3-year-old, I headed to the bottom of the stairs to check and see if my aunt was up there dealing with it. I called for her a couple of times with no response. The baby kept crying. I called for her one more time, and when I got no response, I started walking up the stairs. Then I heard my cousins and aunt playing outside. All the hairs on my body stood up, and I literally felt a chill run down my spine. I quietly turned around, walked down the stairs, got in my car, and drove away. The baby was still crying when I closed the door behind me. A few years later, I was drunk at a family party and told my uncle the story. He told me that he and his wife used to hear the baby too, and apparently the previous owners had a kid die of SIDS in that room upstairs. He's uber Catholic and had a mass said for the baby. He said after that it never happened again. Still gives me the willies.